Guys, today we're going to be talking about is the next couple chapters in Sun Tzu's Art of War. Okay? So the first one, so when we have a conflict between us and opponent, right, and we have everything in our favor, every advantage, everything that could possibly make us invincible, knowing ourselves, knowing the troops, knowing the extensions of ourselves, which would be, our military aspects, quote unquote, or whatever is considered an extension. We could consider that employees, we consider that friends, family, and people, maybe contacts or whatever. And so we have all these this home court. And everybody's coherent. So we have every advantage of being invincible, right? Knowing ourselves, knowing the extension of ourselves, which is our friends and people that are on our side, basically. The advantage comes when you see the weakness in the opponent, right? So it's basically like, imagine if there was a stronghold and their only means of supplies was coming from the west, and then you somehow were able to subvert all the armies and everything, and were able to take down every single supply cart to supply your army, and let only, and then take every single supply cart and make sure that they have no information, and then put little whatevers to mess with their mind. If you had like little notes or whatever, or some, you could use some mythological thing to do psychological warfare, like that kind of stuff. Like unorthodox, you have the orthodox, which is cutting off supplies, and then the unorthodox, which is messing with the mind of the commander. There you go. Right? So when you have an advantage, you have an incredible advantage. You leverage, right? You use the feudal lords, you know all the feudal lords, what their goals are, what their strategy is, what they want, and then you help them get to there, right? So if they want land, guess what we're trying to do? We're saying, hey, we'll cut you a pretty slick deal, you dig? Like that kind of stuff, right? And then when you have that advantage, when they have a major weakness that you identify, and then you strike, that's when, I don't want to say quote George Soros, but this is attributed to him. But when you're right, be a pig, right? When you're right and you have the advantage, leverage the crap out of it, right? Leverage everything, right? Because imagine, and then, like, imagine you had advantage, right? Now, there's some wisdom to this, right? Some wisdom, because when you look at George Soros, he's one of the most ridiculous investors that has ever lived. Ridiculous, like 35% annualized returns over 30 years. Ridiculous stuff. Like out of this world, blows everybody out of the water kind of stuff, right? And so when he had an advantage, when he was wise, when there was a wise decision that he made, he leveraged the crap. He used everything at his disposal to make that opportunity and stick with it and drive it all the way to the end of the whatever he was looking at, right? Whatever the situation was. Like if there was this particular like thing going on with government and he was like, okay, then he's making a specific, play or whatever, he would hold it all the way to the very end. All the way, hold it, and it'd take a lot of courage, because like those positions would easily be like 120% of the portfolio in one position. Oh, jeez. Because like 120%, because you'd leverage the rest, right? You'd leverage 20% extra, right? The entire portfolio, and huge amounts of leverage. Crazy stuff. But when he had the advantage, he leveraged it. Okay. The next one is that their only advantage against us, if they're playing against us, is that they know what we're going to do, that they can spot our weaknesses. So what do? We make it impossible for them to even perceive what we're doing, what we're thinking about, our behavior, past, present, future. So basically become a ghost. We become this, San Tzu talked about spirit-like form. Spirit-like form. Where basically what we do is that we've just become this swirling mass of water or air, quote unquote, this is just an analogy, where basically there's no distinction that can be made. Like preferences on what you do, the orthodoxies, how you're moving, what things are going on. They don't know that their weaknesses or their strengths, and you're striking in different areas all over the place, and they can't even organize. And so you're, and then they don't even know where your strengths are. They don't even know where your weaknesses are, right? Because they don't know anything about you. And the edge comes from knowing the opponent's weaknesses and then exploiting it, right? Being, leveraging that, right? But if they don't know, if it's just, an amorphous, mass, and then also you're throwing these punches, these things that they have to react to because you're hitting them all over the place in terms of their weaknesses. They don't know where to put their assets to defend themselves, and so they're being reactionary. They can't even, they're trying to get as much information about us as possible, but they can't do it since it's just like this thing that's just so mentally impenetrable. They can't tell when your weaknesses are. They can't tell where your strengths are. And not to mention you're one step ahead of them, so even if they do try to find a distinction, guess what you're going to do? You're going to punish it. Right? It's like playing rock, paper, scissors, and then you wait, and then you have like some body language cue, or some body language cue, you study them enough, where then they change their behavior when they know that they see a pattern, and then you punish that pattern. And you play rock, paper, scissors, you put rock. They did whatever. Then you put rock again. Then you put rock again, and then they're like, And then they're like this, and then you do scissors, and then it totally just destroys. And then they're like as soon as they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do paper. Oh wait, I'm gonna reverse engineer. So then you're like, so what's the likelihood that they're gonna be doing this? I'm not gonna do rock. What's the likelihood that they'll lose to that or whatever? Interesting, right? So then you're just playing mind games with them, right? And so you're doing this amorphous strategies. And sometimes what's best is to be completely random. What's amorphous? What's nebulous? Is when somebody thinks that you have a plan, and really what you're doing is that you're looking at a numbers generator to decide your next movement. Ooh. Well, that's not exactly what we imagine if somebody was trying to predict the future of what you were going to do, rock, paper, scissors, and they didn't know what you were going to do. And then you decided to say, oh, I'm just going to pick randomly, and then use a numbers generator to actually do that, accurately. And then you do that, and then you flip it every so often to do something strategic, something different, and then you do that randomly. And then they have no idea, because they know that you're doing some sort of strategy, but then the majority of the time you're doing just random crap that they're just trying to make patterns out of nothing. Who's in charge? Us. What's next? If they can't draw distinctions, they lose. If you cut their even perception, like if they have spies to try and get to know what your strategy is, and they can't spy on your stuff, or you're just kind of one of this elusive figure, because I know there was some generals that were kind of elusive, and then they just strike and just win, and then nobody had no idea what they were thinking about or doing or whatever. They just see the aftermath of the battle, And then also, when you're like that, then you can let them see certain things so that they make the wrong conclusion, and then you guide them down that path. So the information that they get is either totally inaccurate, or to my advantage, or to your advantage. It's like, it's like, what is anybody gonna do with that? That's so hard to deal with. As soon as they make a distinction and learn, yeah, we already covered that. Then he talks about distinction, form, some sort of harmony, and then you ascribe values, but it's all wisdom. It's basically wisdom. The next one is so know the terrain and get guides, right? So know the layout of the land, do the due diligence that they haven't done, right? Learn as much about every single aspect as possible, from the weapons, from the smallest detail to the highest detail. Not detail, but the main principles of how to clean the weapons, make sure all the behavior of the troops, making sure everything's learning as much about the art and the science and the structure and the methodology and all the tools that go into it, all the parts, and then how they work together. If you do that due diligence of knowing more about how things work, the strategies, the actual land, and you get guides and actual advisors that know stuff about the land, you'll have an advantage because they don't have that stuff. right? So then your troops can be completely incoherent, because then he talks about plundering, right? He talks about plundering and making and securing resources for your army at the disadvantage of the opposing force, right? So basically, then they go out plundering into the countryside, right? And they take all this stuff, right? Now that only happens. Your troops would be more coherent than the defenders, right? Because you would only do that if they're weaker than you. So your coherence is still always better than theirs, and you are rewarded for spreading out and having them, gather those resources again, right? Right? So coherence never falters. Just the strategy to take the maximum advantage changes. But the whole goal is to gain more advantage, right? Like imagine if there was one soldier in a village. Do you have to really form ranks to find that one soldier, or can you just send groups of 2 and 3 to deal with it? Groups of 2 and 3, and then they're carrying stuff over their arms and stuff, and doing random stuff, and they see the guy, and they put it down, and then 3 versus 1, the guy's out. Simple as that, right? But the plan's always coherent. Attack when they're tired, right? Because you're not, because the army's the extension of the general. So if the general's tired, the army's tired, everybody's tired except your troops. Attack when they're tired. So afternoon and dusk, or at night when they're sleeping. Yep. So if you have to have somebody, so if somebody's gonna make a major decision, it's like you versus them. Take a nap right before you're supposed to, like take a nap reasonably before you're supposed to deal with them, and you have the meeting at night, especially after a long day when you know that they've worked a lot. They'll make bad decisions and you'll win, right? Hey, we'll have card night, and they've been working for 12 hours that day, and you had a nap about 6 hours before, and you had a nice green tea, and you sat there and you feel great, and then you show up and the guy's like, all right, let's play, and then you crush him. There you go. Don't attack strongholds, right? If you know that they're strong in an area, don't attack them. If there's walled cities, just don't attack walled cities. Don't buy their lies. Don't buy their lies. That's literally what he said. Well, if you could synthesize the principle, that's literally what he said, but it doesn't really tell you how to tell the difference between an enemy's lie and something that's true, like true piece of information versus misinformation that they're giving you. So that might be more helpful if he said something about that. Maybe we'll get into it. Maybe it's in the back of the book or something like that. But leave a way for your enemy to rout, because all you're doing is just directing their flow, right? Because we're not here to fight the troops. We're here to we're here to win the battle, right? Not win the battle. We're here to win the war, right? To get our state to get what it wants, right? Because the army is just an instrument that the government uses to negotiate, right? With treaties, and they have terms and conditions that people agree to for whatever, right? What is it? Yeah, so leave them away till they're out, and don't get in the way for them to go home, right? Because if they're like, man, screw this war, I'm out, I'm going home. Let's not be in the way so that they go home and be with their family, because they probably won't go back to war if they're with their family. And if you're like, well, this guy's in between me and my family, well, that's a threat, right? So we don't want to do that. Give them a way out. Like, you have this wall, and then you have going home and being with your family. Certain death or being with your family, and like, yeah, certain death. No, they're gonna be like, yeah, I'm going home, bro. And most, yeah. Give allies things to do so they're not restless. Don't count on reinforcements to win. Have just your stuff that's in your control win, and then use your allies to leverage the victory. But you're not relying on them to come in the last second to save you, right? Because then that's out of your control, and you're not really. Then that's a weakness, right? That's a weakness, and we're not invulnerable, right? If that's the case. Don't be resolved to defeat. Don't be resolved to not getting hurt, right? Because it said, because it's like, don't have a resolve to die, don't have a resolve to live, because then you'll be captured, right? So don't have a resolve to, lose, and don't have a resolve not to get hurt in the process of winning, right? Anger, it's all these emotions, right? It's all these processes that we have, and all we have to do is just work through, because like these are just modalities of the things that we've, systems that we have in our head since our childhood, right? So if we just work on ourselves and use visualizations and feel these particular, whatever emotions fully when we experience them, and get to the root cause and the essence and what we really think about them, even if they're painful, then we'll be able to resolve them, and anger will be useful and not a detriment, right? You won't be quick to anger and then somebody can manipulate that and do that stuff. No. It'll actually be when a boundary is broken, then anger comes out, and that's actually valuable. Honor, somebody can just shame you, or somebody can act without honor, or assert that somebody acted without honor, and then you have to then you're like, oh, you're trying to prove to the enemy. Well, they're messing with their mind, right? And then loving the people, it's like you care about the troops, but when you know that the most strategically advantaged position is to send them over the top, quote unquote, and you know that 50% of them aren't coming back, would you make the call? That's the hard part. And especially in war, it's like, that's a terrible decision to make. Oh my gosh, it's terrible. But in war, it's all about winning, right? So, and that's terrible. That's terrible. Okay. Yeah, so that was the next couple chapters. I'm not sure, I didn't number them, but that's kind of some of the principles that I was able to glean from them. So if you have any comments, suggestions in the comments, I'd love to hear them below. Take care now. Bye-bye.